Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn. How are you doing today? I am flipping the Spellbinders March Club kits. Here's a quick recap of the 4 cards that I'll be making in this video. As per usual, I will be creating at least 1 flat, 1 layered, 1 interactive, and 1 pop-up card. And I end up not using the Glimmer of the Month, which I do get. So there will be another video a little bit later this month where I craft with the Glimmer of the Month. But in this video, you'll see the clear stamp and die of the month, the small die of the month, the embossing folder, and the large die of the month. So getting started with my flat card, I really love how well the clear stamp and die of the month and the small die of the month coordinate or work together, because the butterfly stamps, actually all of the stamps really, they fit and match with the small die of the month really well. So what I am doing is first stamping with a nice dark black ink, and I wanted to get it really dark, and I should not have removed that stamp just yet. It would have been better to leave that where it was, and you'll see why in a moment. What I did from the small die of the month was there are 2 dies that will cut out the upper wings and the lower wings of your butterfly. I've die cut those out of foam, and it's just regular foam. Mine happens to have an adhesive backing, so that makes it convenient to mount onto my acrylic block. And I am inking it up with Versamagic ink, which is a bit of a chalky ink, and that's why I said it would have been better to leave this butterfly stamp right where it was so that I can ink over top of this again with a nice dark ink, and then really kind of crisp up that butterfly design, because pigment inks, the way that they are formulated, they have a tendency to sit on top of your substrate or your paper instead of actually absorbing into your paper like a dye ink would. It's just because the particles are larger, and so that's great for a lot of things, like giving a little bit more of an opaque coverage. But if you want your previously stamped image to come through nice and cleanly, then having that original butterfly stamp in place so that you can kind of overstamp it is good. Or you can just stamp the wings first. And what I'm gonna do, because the clear stamp of the month does have these solid stamps, I am going to stamp that right over top, again using some Versamagic ink, and that gives it just another little pop of color on this butterfly. And I am stamping directly onto my card front. So this is one of those rare occasions where I am making a truly flat card. And because normally my self-defined rules for a flat card are no more than 1 additional layer of cardstock and flat embellishment, so nothing two-dimensional. And I thought that clean and simple, I think, works really well, but I did want to kind of going along with the abstract look of the butterfly because of the floral design. It's not really an outline or a drawing of a butterfly, it's just, floral images in the shape of a butterfly. So I thought adding some splatter would go really well with that abstract feel. I didn't want to get too much of that splatter onto my butterfly though, so that's why I put a scrap of paper over top of my butterfly to avoid or just to block that that portion of the card out. And I'm splattering with the same 3 inks that I used to color my butterflies. So it's a really easy way to color. You can color using coordinating dies that you've cut out of foam, and I always love when a stamp set does include some solid stamps, because then that makes it really easy to color in areas as well. So really, really fun card. It's nice to do a truly flat card every once in a while. So this one will definitely go through the mail really easily. I do like how the flower, the purple flower on the left turned out, because I only inked up the edges of the flower. So that gave a pretty neat two-tone effect that I like. Next, we're moving on to my layered card. And here I am going to be crafting with the small die of the month again, and the embossing folder, as well as the clear stamp and die of the month. So I am embossing some vellum, and I've mentioned in the past that I have been a little bit nervous to put vellum through a 3D emboss folder, because you get so much dimension. And so what I did was I changed up the sandwich a little bit. So if you are using the universal plate system, what you would normally use for a 3D emboss folder is your A plate, your 3D embossing folder with the cardstock in between, and then your D plate. What I did instead, because I got some cracking of my vellum where it actually kind of created cracks straight all the way through. So what I did instead, the sandwich that I used was the E plate, which is really the squishy mat, and then I used the B plate. And that seemed to be a good thickness for 3D embossing vellum, where you get the white of the where the vellum has sort of takes on the pattern of the 3D emboss folder, but it doesn't actually crack or break your vellum. So for me, and the vellum that I have, I think a lot of this is going to be dependent on how thick your vellum is also. Mine's rather thin. So you might need to play around a little bit with your folders if you're finding that your vellum actually cracks or breaks under the all of that dimension, because 3D emboss folders, they do add a lot of dimension. So that combination happened to work well for me. So again, that's the platform base. Then I put my 3D emboss folder with the vellum inside. And then I use E, which is the squishy mat, and B, which they've labeled as the platform top. So that was my sandwich. And what I've been doing here is I am stamping this really cool design that is part of the clear stamp and die of the month, and it fits perfectly in the space that's created when you have two of the small die of the month combined to form kind of a pattern on your card front. This is USA 2 in size. And the pattern for the small die of the month fits perfectly that USA 2 size. And what I did was, again, I took the solid floral stamp from this clear stamp of the month, and I did some second generation stamping, because parts of the stamped image are solid, really the leaves. Parts are just the outline, which are the flowers, but I wanted something in between. I wanted something that's not fully solid, and so by doing a second impression, so stamping off your first impression and then without re-inking, stamping where you want it to go, you get a little bit of a more ghost impression. So it's a little bit lighter. It doesn't have quite as much of that ink. And so that gave me a nice in between. So it's a way to just add a little bit of kind of interest if you're trying to keep everything monochromatic, which is my goal for this card. But you can see how that stamped image of that design fits so perfectly in that center gap there. And then what I'll do is I will layer the vellum butterfly wings on top of the solid area that's left on the small die of the month. And again, I wanted to keep everything monochromatic, but I like having a little bit of that texture and pattern of the 3D embossing folder. And so that just gives it a little bit more interest instead of it just being regular just vellum by itself. And I am stacking 2 layers of the butterfly body. That's the only place where my vellum is stuck down. And so straight over top is going 1 layer of just the same blue cardstock, and then the topmost layer of the body is a silver matte mirror card. So lots of different shine, different kind of substrates with the vellum and the specialty card, but still a very overall monochromatic look. And I'm adding a little bit of silver glitter Nuvo drops in the centers of the flowers. Again, just to pick up a little bit more of that silver. It's not an extra color, so I think it just gives a little bit of an accent to this piece. But I love the monochromatic look to it. So as you can see there's a sentiment that fits perfectly inside that stamped image as well. And I do love that more faint solid stamping on just some of the flowers. So that is my layered card. Now moving on to my interactive card. You may have seen this card style before. It's something of a kind of an easel slider. Usually you'll find lots of specialty dies that will do this pretty easily for you, but I'm going to show you a way where you can just do this with really any shaped die. I'm using the 4 petals nested shape dies. These are really fantastic. I'm kind of loving this shape. So all you want to do is you want to find one that's large enough where you still have enough of a border all the way around, because you're going to need to have some foam attached behind this panel. So you just want to make sure you're leaving yourself some space. And this die, it's important to look at your dies to know where the cut line is. For this die, the cut line is actually inside the metal edge by quite a bit. And I drew a line at the top where I want to be careful to line up my cutting plate, my top cutting plate, so that I don't go over that line. What that's going to result in is that at the very top, it's going to stay connected. The paper doesn't cut off completely. And that's important because we're going to need to put some score lines. So from the bottom edge of the cut line, you want to score maybe about 3/8 of an inch. And all I'm doing is I'm giving myself a guide, because you only want to score the shape that you've cut. You don't want to actually score from the top, from the edge of the paper. It looks like I'm scoring, but all I'm doing is I'm just kind of making sure I'm in the same score track. And at the opposite end, where we have the partial die cut, you want to just connect those 2 edges. Where the 2 cut lines end, you want to score there. And then you just want to score directly It doesn't have to be directly in half, but you can decide. Start with half, and then when you see how that looks, you can always change that up a little. What this score line will affect is essentially kind of the angle that your easel stands up at. So you could play around with that, but basically at the end of the bottom cut line, you want to go up 3/8 of an inch. That's going to be a glue tab. Then at the top of your cut line, where your two cut lines end, you want to connect those two endpoints with another score line. So you're never scoring all the way across the edge of this panel. You are only ever scoring in that whatever shape die that you used. Now, the reason why I left myself a little bit of extra room at the top is because I'm going to punch out a bit of a thumb notch here. And that gives us an easy way to access the panel that will get attached to basically the flap that we just created, in order to pull that up and bring your easel upwards to reveal what's underneath the aperture, so what's under that flap. And this card is USA 2 in size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And that panel that I've been doing all of the cutting into, that's the full front of my USA 2 size card. And so now it's a matter of decorating your card. The one last piece you will need is that panel that I talked about, which will pull that flap upwards in order to make your easel stand. Now, you can use a rectangular die if you happen to have one, but I didn't have one that fit, so I ended up just hand cutting another panel. So from this panel that I'm kind of measuring, I'm just using it just needs to be the width of your whatever shape die. So that 4-petal label die cut, it needs to be the same width. And in terms of the height, it needs to extend from the bottom of that cut panel all the way straight to the very top. And so that's the width. That's how you determine the width and the height of this panel. Now, what I want to do is match the same shape of the panel that I just cut. I want to get that same sort of curved shape at the bottom, so that it matches that flap that we cut out earlier. So that's just a small detail, and I don't know that you'll necessarily see that, but I just wanted to make sure everything lined up nicely so that you don't see that extra edge. Didn't do a great job of lining this up or measuring the width. I'm not sure which of the two, but I think that step is a little bit optional, but I think it just makes for a bit of a neater finish, so that as you pull that up, you're not going to see the extra cardstock. Everything's going to just look really nice and flush at the bottom there. So that's a little bit of a dry fit of how and where everything is going to go. And I decided, just, because everything else is so curvy, to also round the corners of the top of this panel here. And that's going to serve essentially as a pull tab. That's what we're pulling on in order to bring the easel up and reveal what's underneath it. So I'm not 100% if I'm getting the name of this mechanism right, but I do think it's something along the lines of an easel reveal slider, something like that. And then all I've done here is I did the same partial die cutting that I did to create this panel with the flap where our easel's cut into it. And I just die cut that out of some pattern paper. And instead of scoring at the top, I just cut and connected those two endpoints. And I cut that inner flap right off. And that way it can get attached all the way around, but it leaves my my easel stand white, which is what I prefer. And I should have used a little bit of liquid adhesive because this is a little bit finicky to get lined up. It should line up perfectly because I used the exact same die to cut it. So that's why I was being really finicky with trying to get that exactly in the right spot. But again, I want to make sure that that thumb notch comes through, so I'm going to notch this again. You, just depending on how strong your punch is, or if you wanted to use a die, you could use a die to create that notch as well. But I don't mind having to punch twice, because sometimes I use rather thick cardstock. So just especially when you start layering it up, I just want to make sure that you don't get your cardstock or your project stuck in your punch. I've had that happen before. So here's that large pull tab essentially. And again, I'm just going to cover this with a little bit of pattern paper. This actually happens to be a digital pattern paper that I printed out with my inkjet printer, and so it is on the thinner side, but that works really well because all of the other white cardstock that you see me use, that's all heavyweight cardstock, so 120 pound, and that just helps to make sure that, especially with the pull tab, that nothing feels too floppy. The top layer that's pink here has the pink border. That might be just 100 pound, but for your pull tab, you do want that to be pretty strong. So I've already assembled the tree that comes with the large die of the month. I did it all off camera because it's a bit of time to put it all together. There's die cutting of the leaves and flowers, and then all the layering of the tree components. So I figure I think you'll be able to figure out how to do all of that. I put all of the leaves, all the greenery down first, and then I overlaid the flowers on top. And for the largest flower, I think there's a second die that you can use as the center of that flower, but I just put Nuvo drops instead. And so here I'm just trying to figure out what I want to be revealed. So I decided to pull out the stamp of the month again because I kind of like the sub-sentiments that are in there, and I like that they're small. And the large die of the month has the this really nice happy birthday sentiment, and kind of interesting. It's got that sort of solid underline at the bottom, which is something a little bit different. And so I'm gonna use both of those die cuts, and that the sentiment is going to be what gets revealed when you pull the easel up. And I went ahead and die cut it twice just so that the sentiment has a little bit of dimension to it, and that's actually going to serve as an easel stopper. You saw a moment ago that I used my top panel to trace out the aperture, and I know you can't really see it too well on camera, the pencil line, but the reason why I did that is for this step here so that I know where I can stamp inside, and because I'm stamping directly onto my card base right now. But I want to make sure that whatever I stamp, whatever I glue down, whatever I'm doing on the inside here, I want to make sure that what I want to be visible when you pull that easel stand upwards is will actually be visible and not covered by the panel that's going to get attached on top of this. And the cardstock that I'm using here, it's the Spellbinders solid color cardstock, which is nice. It's 100 pounds. So doubling these up gives you something pretty thick and dimensional. Not super dimensional to where it's going to trigger extra shipping. It's still, it's going to be enough to stop our easel from just continuing to slide down. So it'll stay upright by having that. And so I've got pretty much all of the components ready to put this all together. And it's kind of fun to use a different shape for this easel reveal slider, as I'm calling it. So definitely play around with what you've got. You could use, maybe a hexagon shape or a, postage edge shape. There's quite a lot of flexibility, and it's, and maybe, that just saves you from having to buy a specialty die, especially if you do have nested shape dies, because then you'll have dies where you can use to cut the mats and layers for that as well. So you've kind of got everything I think you need to create this type of interactive card without having to buy anything special. And it just gives you just more use and stretches the supplies of your nested shape dies. So here what I've got is some foam adhesive. This is rather old, so that's why I'm putting just a line or two of liquid adhesive on here as well. So it is adhesive on both sides. This foam has adhesive on both sides. But the older your dry adhesive is, the more potential that it's actually dried out and lost its adhesive strength. And so if that happens, you can just do exactly what I'm doing here, apply some liquid adhesive, and that's going to give that a nice permanent stick. The other thing is that if you want to use it in on a project where you need a more permanent, you want to be assured that it's a very permanent hold, then definitely use some liquid adhesive. I got a little bit overboard and was on autopilot trying to cover this entire panel with, and I'm just covering the areas that are bordering that flap. But you're going to see in a moment here, and it's a good thing I used liquid adhesive, but it's also a good thing that I realized this before it really dried because you don't need all of the adhesive on the inside here. You really just need adhesive on that bottom edge and on the sides. So, because remember, we have a pull tab that is going to lift that flap up. And so if I left all of that adhesive there, there would be nowhere, we need to leave space essentially for our pull tab. And the pull tab is going to get attached to the back of this flap, and just at that bottom I use 3/8 of an inch. You could go with 1/4 of an inch, you could do 1/2 an inch, whatever you prefer there. But that's where our pull tab gets attached, just along that little flap there, that score line that we added at the bottom of the flap. And so here, anything below our pull tab, you can put some foam. So I just decided to put a little bit of, instead of wasting it, just decided to use those little strips there. And then we can add this to the front of our card panel. And again, I used a little bit of liquid adhesive just because that foam adhesive was a little bit old and lost a little bit of its stick. But also you do want this panel to be nice and firmly stuck. So in any case, I would have liked to have used some liquid adhesive even with fresh new foam pads there. I punched out this circle. You could definitely use a circle die if you wanted. And that's so that we actually have a larger area to grab onto the pull tab. And I just found I was looking for like a little arrow or something, but I found the word pull as part of I think it's the shutters from APG. And that's another really fun interactive die set. But I like that because it gives you the instructions for what you need to do. And so I've die cut a circle, and then I did a partial die cut of just white cardstock so that I can put that behind the word pull. That way you can actually see it. It also stabilizes this circle so that it's thicker, and it's matches or not exactly, but more closely matches the thickness of our pull tab. So I'm layering this up a little bit, and then I'm gonna complete it with a full circle. So this is gonna end up being a really nice strong piece here. So I've got the colored portion facing the front, and then I've got a couple of partial circles to match the thickness of my pull tab, and then another full circle on the back. Just gives it a really nice, clean, finished look on the back, which I don't know how many people look at, but instead of seeing those partial circle cuts at the top, you see a nice full circle, and it adds, again, a little bit more strength and sturdiness. So that's the entire mechanism complete. Now we can have some fun with placing and figuring out where everything goes. And I knew for certain I wanted the birthday word die to sit on the inside, because I definitely need something with a little bit of dimension as my easel stopper. But what I was considering is whether I want a little bit of grass at the bottom of my tree, or if I want the word happy, so that when the card is closed, there's still a sentiment. It may not be the full sentiment, but it'll be a sentiment. And so I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, but for sure I wanted the tree. So I wanted to get that down so that it'll be easier to preview the other pieces without juggling, too many pieces. And as with any easel card, if you want something to stand up on that easel, you only want to glue it down to the bottom portion. And after I made my decision as to what I wanted to do, I went with the grass. I forgot to hit the record button. So you don't see me actually putting that on, but it's not that hard. Then I did also, just to extend the grass onto that little glue tab at the bottom there, I used the same die so that I have that same curved edge. And I didn't want to have a single layer of cardstock going over that score line. I don't think that would hinder like how flexible that fold is. So I don't mind that there's a little bit of that white showing there. Okay, so now onto my pop-up card. So this card features the large die of the month again, and this time I am actually going to make what this die set is intended to make, because it is intended to create a pop-up box card. So what I've done is, out of Spellbinders solid color cardstock, I've cut the back panel out of blue. That's kind of going to be my sky. I do like using the Spellbinders solid color cardstock for this because it's 100 pounds, so it's nice and sturdy. This isn't going to be floppy. I would not suggest doing this with, say, a 60, 65 pound. I consider that a little too lightweight. It's not going to stand up very well. And so I definitely recommend something at least 100 pound. Now I did die cut 3 of these bridge pieces. I don't actually end up using all 3 because I got away with just using both of the pieces that I cut this one into. So there's some very subtle debossed lines that give you a little bit of a cutting guide. So here, this fits perfectly on my front piece here because it just comes right up to where on the side pieces, right where it starts to have that nice decorative curve. So it matches that sort of straight section there. And then if you don't trim anything away, then you can use that on kind of that backmost section. It matches the height before at the very top of that second section there. So it's really nice that you have the one die that cuts out these the one piece, and then you can just cut it down to the height that you need. And conveniently, it does have some deboss lines that that do give you a guide for where to trim down. So I thought that maybe once I saw 2 in place, I thought maybe that's what I want to stick to. But I did end up adding another bridge piece. The thing with the this die set is that when it puts in sort of the I don't want to say score line, because what it actually does is it actually perforates where you fold. That's not my preferred, I'll be honest, it's not my preferred way of a die putting in score lines, because, well, I can see why they did it, because likely you want to use a thick cardstock like I am here. And it does, if it's perforated, it makes it easier to fold. Because if they didn't perforate it, I would take all of these pieces and just score them again to get a deeper score line. I did in any case, but I don't think I needed to. And this is my preferred way of attaching the second side. I just fold everything flat, because all of this is intended to be able to fold flat and fit into an envelope. And I fold all of my bridge pieces flat, and then I fold the opposite side right on top of it. And that just ensures that everything's going to find its location and fall where it needs to in order to fold flat. So, as I was saying with the perforated edges, there's some pros and cons to it. If you're using thick cardstock, it's nice because then you don't have to rescore those lines, and you're going to be able to fold it just fine. But I still prefer when they deboss a line instead of perforating where something needs to be folded, because I feel like the cardstock is going to stay stronger if it's scored and folded as opposed to perforated and folded, because perforated means it's actually cutting all the way through. It's just not cutting, it's cutting like a dashed line. So that's my only, that's the only thing I don't super prefer. I can see why they did it, because like I said, you do want to use a nice thick cardstock here, but I don't mind, doing the extra scoring. But then again, if they're building this so that you don't need a ton of extra tools, maybe not everybody has, a scoring tool. So There's always pros and cons. So I've pulled out, this is actually the large die of the month from March 2 years ago. And it's got these really cute critters. I put together the bunny, but looking at my card now in front of me, finished, I might add the other two characters. So check out my socials. I'll be posting this to Instagram and Facebook as well. So you'll find out, or maybe I'll use this as part of the video thumbnail, the final card, because I think I want to give this bunny some friends. So I might add the little chick, and you can also create I think a sheep with this as well. And then it's also got a sentiment, a couple word dies, hello spring, but I'm just going to use spring. And I did end up with some leftover leaves, and with the flowers, I really love how they designed the flowers where you have the one plate and it pretty much gives you all of the flowers that you're going to need. So I didn't have any extra there, but I did end up going back and cutting an extra one just so that I have a little bit of an accent to go along with my sentiment at the bottom. And then I pulled out March. This is the small die of the month from March of last year. And originally, I was going to use the bunny from that die set, but here I'm just going to use the clouds. And because I thought the bunny from the large die of the month from 2 years ago was really cute. Plus, I needed the grass die out of that die set from 2 years ago. So really, really fun that I guess March it does make sense to have spring Easter themed die sets, but if you're looking for things to kind of coordinate and you're a longtime subscriber, maybe look to the same month from years past to see what all might coordinate with the current month. Here's a final recap of all of the cards that I made in this video. This is my flat card, which features the clear stamp of the month and the small die of the month. This is my layered card, which features the small die of the month, the clear stamp of the month, and a little bit of the embossing folder of the month. I'll be crafting again with that embossing folder, so I'll be creating something that more prominently highlights that because it's a lovely design. Here's my interactive card, which is an easel reveal slider, no specialty dies necessarily, and I'm featuring the large die of the month, and the stamp sentiment is from the clear stamp of the month. And I love this card so much. It turned out really well, and I love that tree and how prominent it is. And here is my pop-up card, which features the large die of the month, as well as some past club kids from previous Marches. And so stay tuned to see if I add some more critters and some friends for that bunny. I hope that you enjoyed today's flip video. If you did, let me know in the comments if you have a favorite. I would love to know. Thank you so much for joining me. Products to everything I used are in the description box below. Thank you again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.